Bethesda is changing explosive damage with update 32, so I decided to conduct lots of tests to fully understand the changes. Let's dive in. Hello everyone, welcome back to another Fallout 76 video. I hope you have been well. I've been having some issues in my personal life, but I'm not gone, so don't worry about that. Now, as you may have heard already, there is a huge change being introduced with the Night of the Moth DLC regarding explosive damage, but not for every kind. According to Bethesda's patch note, explosive perks will no longer increase the damage players take from their own explosions. In other words, this means that your self-explosive damage will become weaker with update 32. I know it sounds a bit complicated at first, especially because it comes with some new rules, but in terms of gameplay, this change is very straightforward, as you are about to see. Moreover, as a result of this change, it's now possible to neutralize most self-explosion damage with endgame gear. Well then, let's start with a short overview. Alright, so self-explosive damage is working differently with update 32, but how exactly? Well, first of all, the changes are only noticeable when you are using explosive perks, like Demolition's Expert or Fireproof. This change works for both offense and defense, at least according to my tests. While most outer explosive sources will deal the same amount of damage, your own explosions are now much weaker. By self-explosions, I mean any explosive damage you generate. For example, your explosive weapons now hurt you way less at close range. In fact, you can neutralize most of them. Also, your explosives, such as grenades or mines, are now pretty much harmless when it comes to self-detonation, and even car explosions detonated by yourself can be fully blocked with endgame builds. The changes are really drastic, and that's why I felt the need to create a fully dedicated video here. Now, it's time to show you my test results. First, let's begin with explosives. Well, using explosives in Fallout 76 has always been a dangerous job since it often leads you to your own demise, especially when explosives bounce back or get stuck under the floor underneath you. But all of that is about to become a part of history with update 32, because now using all sorts of explosives is a safe thing to do. Really, even the strongest ones, like Nuka mines or Nuka grenades, are now harmless to the carrier. Well, apart from the huge chunks of rads you still receive, of course. Now, the difference is so abysmal here that I had to make a side-by-side comparison. With max rank Fireproof and Demo Expert active, I take no damage whatsoever with update 32, but with the previous patch, I die instantly. With this in mind, I decided to test further to understand why are things so different now. In fact, I also realized that my friend Maddock Rod still died with update 32, while I took no damage from Nuka grenades. Yes, we were testing both at the same time, and sometimes that's a really useful thing to do. We compared each other's defenses, and we were about 200 apart in physical. So yeah, believe it or not, the answer here lays on physical defense. I started testing by removing one armor piece at a time, as shown in the footage. I started with 478 defense, then 375, even at 260 I still received no damage. It was only until I had about 200 physical defense that the Nuka grenades started hurting me, physically of course. Before that it was nullified if you exclude the radiation as it is. That you obviously cannot block unless you use power armor or a hazmat suit or more perks. Even then, I don't think the perks can block it anyway, it's too much. But when my physical defense reached 150, I instantly died at close range. So obviously self-explosion damage is not fully gone, but it's now much weaker than it used to be, and it can be neutralized at endgame. And these tests are a solid proof of that. Furthermore, I did similar tests on the live servers with update 31, and yeah, with 450 physical defense and max rank of Fireproof and Demo Expert, with about the same HP too, I go down from a normal grenade, so you can have an idea of how different things are working now. I also tried with Nuka explosives, even though I didn't need to, but just to make my point clear, I died every single time. Well, what have we learned here with all these tests? Having around 450 physical defense with update 32 is basically a green card to nullify any self-explosive damage from grenades and mines. In fact, having about 300 seems to be enough, but just to be on the safe side, I would rather aim a bit higher. Now let's proceed to car explosions. Car explosions are quite buggy ever since update 31 went live. There was a huge issue with explosive damage some months ago, and ever since Bethesda fixed it, car explosions have never been the same again, at least not on my end. And that's because they became inconsistent. Again, with both Fireproof and Demo Expert max rank active, I often instantly die from any car explosion while I'm not part of a team, no matter what car. Note that alone cars deal more damage than others, for example. However, sometimes with the exact same build, I take less damage. It's like magic. It depends on the day, on the play session, I don't know exactly what it is, but here's a side-by-side from two different play sessions. Same exact build, same type of car, yet the damage I received is very different. Well, at least the empath mutation can solve this problem while I join a team, so nullifying car explosions with update 31 was already possible with the right build and conditions. However, with update 32, you no longer need to rely on empath or a team to block car explosions. You can just play as solo and take absolutely no damage from a car ever again. Well, as long as you have Fireproof rank 3 and a decent amount of physical defense, that is. Remember the conclusion from the previous point? Yep, if you have at least 300 to 400 physical defense, the higher the better. I can assure you that car explosions will not hurt you from now on, or at least until this change is active. You never know what might change in the future. Anyway, I tested many times, and as you can see, my HP bar does not move at all. So the main conclusion here is nullifying car explosions as solo, it's just not possible, it's a reality, and something very easy to do, because it just depends on basically endgame gear and Fireproof. Well, let's keep moving. What about explosive weapons? Well, that's a tricky matter. For most explosive weapons, the damage can now be nullified too, as long as you follow the true rules, Fireproof rank 3 and high physical defense. I started testing with my Bloodied Gauss shotgun, with explosive damage by default, which is one of the strongest weapons at close medium range, and while with patch 31 it could easily kill me while not part of a team, with update 32 it's a different story. In fact, I found out that self-damage for this weapon is pretty much like car explosions, inconsistent, buggy as hell, and very, very unreliable. Sometimes I take no damage, other times I take very little damage, in others, the chunks are significant. It's like Fireproof stops working, which could be the case, because that's an ongoing bug right now. Only as part of a team with empath that changes, but all of that confusion is ending soon with update 32. As I mentioned before, I no longer take any damage with my Gauss shotgun. It's such a relief to play with this change now. Anyhow, what about other explosive weapons with the explosive legendary effect? Well, they work the same way. I tested with my explosive Bloodied shotgun and 50 call, and with update 31 they could hurt me quite a bit, especially the 50 call when I shoot non-stop. But now with update 32, both no longer deal self-damage as solo. I tried several times and nope, no damage whatsoever. It's beautiful and game-changing at some degree, but then again, that was already possible to achieve with empath as part of a team, so it's not exactly a huge change, I would say. Lastly, I bet you are curious to know if Legacies are now neutralized too in terms of self-damage, and the answer is not really. I borrowed this Legacy, it's a Bloodied explosive Gatling plasma, and as shown, I can still easily kill myself while shooting at close range. So I'm afraid Legacy users still need to play careful if they don't want to end up dead at the hands of their own weapons, that's for sure. Next, I tested launcher weapons. I was really curious to see what changes were implemented, and boy, oh boy, it's like day and night, pretty much like grenades and mines. The difference between patches is once again abysmal. Let's start with the popular auto grenade launcher. With update 31, this weapon can easily kill the carrier if you don't keep a distance from your own grenades. And by a distance, I mean like medium to long distance. At close, it's like dead. You're gonna die very, very easily. Even with the damage reduction from empath as part of a team, even like that, you can go down easily. However, with update 32, it doesn't matter anymore. You can use and abuse of grenade launchers without worrying about self-damage anymore, because it no longer exists with an endgame build, of course. Just look at that. Absolutely no friendly damage anymore. Just don't forget Fireproof rank 3 and lots of physical defense. I know I keep repeating this, but if these two rules are not met, then you might think I'm wrong or lying or something. That's why it's important to know the test background. Anyway, I also tested the Brotherhood of Steel missile launcher and the self-damage got significantly decreased. The same can be said about the normal missile launcher. Both still inflict some damage with update 32, yes, but it's more like tickling. It's so little that it doesn't really matter anymore. It's not deadly at all, that's what I mean. So now they are also safe to use at close range, unless you know the rules. Lastly, I also tested the Fat Man, but his weapon is way too powerful for bloodied builds to handle, but the self-damage got decreased a bit as well. With 20 to 30% HP, you always die from one missile, no matter the patch, as shown in both updates. But I tested with more HP, full HP actually. You can notice the difference. It's not much, but it's there. Here's a quick side-by-side. I just don't know why the difference is so little for this weapon when it's so drastic for others. I am a bit confused about this one, not going to lie, but the conclusion here is this weapon is dangerous. It's supposed to deal at least 1k damage for no legendary, so it's kinda hard to nullify that, just saying. Well, let's keep moving. What about PvP? How do all these weapons behave while fighting another player? Well, as to be expected, players now deal way less self-explosive damage while in combat with other players, which, to be honest, is a game-changing feature. Not so much on its own, but more well compared to the player damage you can do. For example here, I easily kill myself with self-damage, while my opponent barely takes any damage. Like seriously, how does that even work? It's because my main character, the defender, has about 500 physical defense, and my ult, the attacker, has about 200. But still, in terms of logic, it makes absolutely no sense to take so much friendly damage and your opponent takes like no damage at all. Anyway, with update 32, things are much better, at least I think so. You can now suffer way less damage from your own explosive attacks, which is a great thing for PvP in general. Just keep in mind that launchers are very buggy still. Sometimes direct hits barely do any damage, while compared to VATS hits, as shown, and even the VATS hits can say like 95% chance to hit, and then the projectile goes through the target or bounces in a weird direction and no damage is inflicted. So there's that. I have no idea how does it work, but it does, at least right now. Among many other bugs too, but let's not go there. At least self-explosive damage is now reduced, and that's a beautiful thing. Now, just to make it clear, any exterior source of explosive damage will work the same way as usual with update 32. It should not suffer any changes. For example, when Blood Eagles throw grenades at you or use their launchers, they should inflict the same damage as they did before update 32. After all, that has nothing to do with your own explosive perks or self-explosive damage. Needless to say that explosive damage from other players will or should work the same way it did before. So the only change is really with explosive damage generated by yourself, with the exception of cars. I'm not entirely sure how that one works in the game files, but it does count as self-generated damage all the same, probably because you start the car explosion. Maybe if another player explodes the car, it will work differently, but I did not test that, sadly. Well, with that being said, let's head to the main conclusions. This huge change introduced with update 32 comes to somewhat neutralize self-explosive damage. I know this statement is not 100% accurate, but for the most part, you can now block with the right build, which is basically any endgame build really. If you have a full set of Secret Service or Brotherhood Recon or even Power Armor, you can easily go over 400 physical defense. Plus, Fireproof rank 3 is like an essential perk, which should be part of your build if it isn't yet. Anyway, here's a quick overview of what my tests revealed so far. First of all thrownable explosives are now harmless to the carrier. Even the strongest ones like nuclear grenades and mines do no damage anymore. Talking about no damage, car explosions are now fully neutralized as well. Even the strongest car explosions cannot hurt you anymore with patch 32. Moving forward, all explosive no-launcher weapons are also neutralized, with the exception of legacy explosive weapons, as I already showed in the respective point. So no more killing yourself using standard explosive guns, that's something. Now, while most launcher damage got drastically reduced, some of them can still be deadly to the user, such as the Fat Man. Lastly, when it comes to PvP combat, things improved substantially in terms of balance because now the attacker receives way less damage from their own explosive attacks, which gives them a better chance to fight back their opponent instead of their own weapons. Now, I cannot say that self-explosive damage is fully gone, that's not true, but it's fairly close to be with endgame gear. In fact, you can now block most sources of explosive damage by just having high physical defense and Fireproof rank 3. So I think it's safe to say that most of self-explosive damage is now gone if you meet the necessary requirements, which is basically endgame gear, really. Now, I can't finish this overview without telling you guys what this change means for 76. Is it a good change? Is it a bad one? Well, to be honest with you, I think this is a practical change, and it can be considered both good and bad. First, it can be a good change because, in a way, it makes gameplay more fluid, accessible, and predictable. I mean, many weapons are now back in the game, like most launchers, since it no longer backfires at you. Before, it was a hell on earth to play with because you would kill yourself all the time without wanting to. It was just quite unplayable in my view. Now, it's pretty okay. Some of them are still strong, like the Fat Man, but most of them are now very, very weak or even neutralized, depending on the gear you have. This change is also more user-friendly to new or casual players who do not own the best endgame gear yet, thus unable to resist as well to explosive damage as other players can. Now, it can also be seen as a bad change because, well, it's way less realistic and less challenging in terms of combat. Explosive damage should always do damage to the carrier if you are at close range. We are all supposed to be human players in the end, isn't it like that? But I think a little balance won't hurt anyone. In my view, it's a decent change, a necessary one, at least the logic it is, but I think they may have gone overboard with it. The changes are too drastic for certain sources, or most of them. For example, grenades, mines, car explosions. From instantly dead in one patch, we go to no damage at all in the next patch. I mean, it's too extreme. It's like we are going from 80 to 8, if you know what I mean, the expression, when we should probably be going from 80 to 40 or something alike. Anyway, if Bethesda balances this a bit more, I think this change is very suitable for 76, but if it stays the way it is with patch 32, well, not so much. It just makes the gameplay even easier than what it already is, and that's not something we need for endgame, is it now? Plus, it's really unrealistic, in my view, to take no self-damage at all from most explosive sources. Well, that's everything I wanted to say regarding this change. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think it's a good change or not so much? Alright, thanks for watching everyone. I am Marta Branco and I will see you all in the next one. For now, feel free to leave a like, subscribe and stay tuned for more. Also a huge thanks to all my dear supporters. It means a lot to me. Thanks a lot. And well, time for me to go. Until next time, take care. Adeus. Bye bye.